living on land. Legs. Oh yes, boys and girls. Legs support the body's weight as well as allow movement from place to place. Well, that's true. It doesn't prove they adapted by themselves, though. Lungs. Oh boy, the delicate structure of a fish's gills depends on water for support. On land, lungs carry out gas exchange. That's true. That's not proof one changed to the other, though. They just make this mental, imaginary connection in the kids' minds. I've got a Casio Databank stopwatch, or watch, okay? Holds 300 phone numbers. It's a calculator, stopwatch, an alarm clock, and a countdown timer. It does not tell time. I have to look at it. But it's a pretty amazing machine. $70 at Walmart. I was in Japan a couple years ago, but I did not see the guy who makes the Casio Databank watch. I never saw him. Do I have to see the guy who made it to believe he exists? Is it logical for me to stand here in Tennessee and say, I believe there's a watch designer in Japan that made this thing? Is that logical? Even if I never see him? Sure. Would it be illogical for me to say, I've never seen him, so I don't believe he exists? That would be totally dumb, wouldn't it? And you don't have to see the Creator to believe he exists. Okay? Evolutionists argue against design using arguments they designed. Think about that one. There's a great book talking about the complexity of living things at a micro scale. We sell the book at our website. Michael Behe wrote this on Darwin's black box. He spends a whole chapter describing the hair on a bacteria. That hair is so complicated, it's attached to a little tiny motor. The motor is so tiny that 8 million of them would fit in the cross-section of a human hair, but the motor turns 100,000 RPM. Let's see you build a motor like that. Pretty amazing. And as things get smaller, the world they live in feels more sticky to them. The viscosity of the fluid seems greater. So a bacteria swimming through water is about like a person swimming through peanut butter. And that little motor is so powerful and turns so fast, that bacteria can swim about like a person going 60 miles an hour through peanut butter. Look at a little model of it in our museum if you want to come down and see how they work. And the textbook says, humans probably evolved from bacteria more than 4 billion years ago. What? They can swim through peanut butter 60 miles an hour. We should sign them up for the Olympics, man. We evolved from them. We're getting worse, not better. It's a lie. Nothing this small and complex could have happened by chance. This is a great book that we sell in our bookstore. Just simple illustrations. Could a box evolve? Could an ink pen evolve? Could a paperclip evolve? It just goes through a bunch of simple things and show it just can't happen, okay? Then they talk about the origin of life. Yes, boys and girls, how living things started from non-living matter. This is pure baloney, how they teach this in the books. We're going to cover that after a quick break. Cover a few more lies in the textbooks and then tell you what you can do about it. Some practical steps to fix the problem right after the break. In the last 2 sessions, we covered 15 lies found in the typical textbook. I taught high school science for 15 years, and I'm not against science, I'm not against schools, I'm not against teachers, but I'm against lies. Just don't lie to the kids, okay? The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causeth thee to err from the words of knowledge. Don't listen to things that are simply not true, okay? Get the lies out of the books. The Bible says God created all things. And it says, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Hath not my hand made all these things? God made everything. And the Bible says God formed the entire world. The Bible says God created great whales and every living thing. Now, the textbooks in school are going to teach your kids that every living thing happened by itself. They're not going to teach them God created every living thing, that's for sure. Here's a textbook that says, the history of life on earth began about 3.5 billion years ago. How this occurred has been and will continue to be a topic for inquiry. Let me give you the Hovind translation of what they just said. What they just said is, it's okay to inquire how it evolved. It is not okay to inquire if it evolved. Hey kids, you're allowed to research, how did evolution happen? And if some kid says, well, maybe it didn't happen at all. Oh, shut up, kid, you're out of my class, okay? The only way you can research is, how did it happen? You cannot even ask the question, did it happen? That's not education. That's indoctrination. Okay? I'm sick and tired of paying for that stuff. Now, nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. Paul Davies said, Nobody has a clue how life got started from non-living material by itself. There is not even a good theory how it can happen, but the textbooks are going to teach your kids it just happened, okay? They just tell them, hey, it happened. And you can't even consider the option that maybe God made it. Here's what happened. Back in the 50s, two guys, Miller and Urey, decided to figure out how life evolved. So they took a mixture of chemicals and ran it through these tubes and tried to create life in the laboratory. The experiment's been duplicated many, many times, always been a failure, and always created more problems for the evolutionist. This textbook says, although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself. That is a lie. All they did was create problems for the idea that life could have started by itself. This one says, swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Oh, it sure is. It don't even happen. That's how slow it is. There are several different articles that say life came from clay. Yep, got some clay together and poof, came alive on the bottom of the ocean. They did not address the origin of life in Darwin's book, and it's never been figured out since how life could have started. What he did is he took these four chemicals and put them in these glass tubes, made them circulate around, and tried to create life in the laboratory. This textbook says, many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Progress from complex molecules to the simplest living organism was a very long process. I guess so. If you give it billions of years, somehow it looks more reasonable, you know. This one says, the first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There is no record of the event. But you better believe it, and you're going to be tested on it. The first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. So great-great-great-great-grandpa was soup. This is one of the lies in the textbooks you kids have to face. Nobody has a clue how life could have gotten started by non-living chemicals. Even Haeckel confessed, he's the guy we talked about in the last session, that made up the idea that the embryo has gill slits, you know, so they could justify abortion. Haeckel said, he claimed that spontaneous generation must be true, not because it had been proven in the laboratory, but because otherwise it would be necessary to believe in a creator. Well, Ernst, I'm sorry, bud, that's just the way it goes. Okay, there's a creator, whether you like it or not, okay? So have they really produced life in the laboratory? Oh, they haven't even come close. Here's what they did. They took four gases. They took methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen, ran them through these tubes, ran it through a spark chamber, which is supposed to simulate lightning. They say, we're going to put them together and make life in the laboratory. At the bottom of the flask, they got this red goo, and they kept draining the goo off, because if it went through the spark again, it would destroy it. So they had to make the goo and then save it from the next spark, okay? They said in the textbook here it was rich in amino acids, this red goo was. Well, that's simply a lie, okay? They didn't come close to making life. The problem is they had a reducing atmosphere. In other words, he excluded oxygen. You can look at his four gases. There's no oxygen there. He knew if he had oxygen in there, it would oxidize whatever chemicals tried to combine. You know, you cut a banana open and lay it on the table, it turns brown, it oxidizes. You don't paint your car, and it oxidizes, it rusts. Well, living cells will oxidize quickly in the presence of oxygen. So he didn't put any oxygen in there. That creates a serious problem, because if you have oxygen, you cannot get life to come from non-living chemicals. The problem is ozone is made from oxygen, and ozone blocks UV light, and UV light destroys ammonia, and ammonia is one of the four gases he's got. So you cannot get life to evolve with oxygen, and you cannot get life to evolve without oxygen. Because if you don't have oxygen, you don't have ozone, and now your ammonia gets destroyed. It's just not going to work either way. And the Earth has always had oxygen, even more than today. This guy said, what evidence is there for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere on Earth? The answer is there is no evidence for it, but much against it. We find in general no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, uranium, etc., that an oxygen-free atmosphere ever existed on the Earth. If somebody tells you the early Earth had a reducing atmosphere, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're confused or they're deliberately lying, because it's not true. The Earth has always had oxygen. This article said, it's suggested from the earliest dated rocks at 3.7 billion years ago, Earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. They've always known the Earth had oxygen, even more than we have today. We covered that on Seminar Part 2, how the early Earth probably had even more oxygen, made them live longer. This textbook says, there was no oxygen on the Earth, which is a lie, and then it says the rocks absorbed it. Hello? How can they absorb it if it wasn't there? Well, think about it. Second problem they had with the Miller experiment, they filtered out the product. That is not realistic for nature, okay? They saved the goo from getting sparked the second time because it would have destroyed it. What he actually made in this experiment was 85%